But I have a way of, I have an acronym that sort of summarizes what I take to be 6 different kinds of temperaments. The acronym is N-A-T-U-R-E. Yes, very smart people in this room. Nature, as in human nature. I'll just run through it very, very quickly, and I'm going to use the hard problem of consciousness which is what I had written my doctoral dissertation on, to try to show how these different temperaments play out in the face of a very, very difficult, fundamental philosophical problem. So N is the strategy of naturalizing. A naturalizer goes after philosophical perplexity with the intent of making it disappear. Philosophically difficult facts get absorbed into natural facts, meaning those secured empirically, either by straight observation or by scientific explanation. Naturalizers are typically irked by philosophical questions. The idea of the incorrigibly mystifying just raises their hackles. Among contemporary philosophers, Dan Dennett is a stunning example of a naturalizer. So consider the problem that consciousness presents. What does it feel like? Why does it feel like something to be a working brain? How comes this mush in here to give us the world, or at least some version of it? A naturalizer will either identify consciousness with some known natural facts, or will make the fact of consciousness disappear. So, and when we want to identify consciousness with some known natural facts, you have 2 choices. We can either go the hardware route or the software route. So going the hardware route, consciousness is nothing more than the 40 cycle per second loops of activity between the cerebral cortex and the thalamus. That comes from a very good neuroscientist I know. I said, what do you think consciousness is? He told me. Or going the software route, consciousness is a blackboard representation or a common short-term representation accessible to all the modules of the mind. That came to me from a very prominent cognitive scientist. Or the naturalizer might go after the problematic by trying to eliminate it by way of natural facts. In the case of consciousness, the naturalizer might adduce certain linguistic facts and argue that it's only those natural facts, the way we speak, that give us the illusion that there is something there called consciousness. And such eliminative techniques were made very popular by Wittgenstein. In any case, however he does it, the naturalizer is not going to allow a mysterious fact to just lie there and be mysterious. The second strategy, the A, I call aestheticizing. I was just reading the collected letters of the novelist Saul Bellow that were recently published. Very, very fascinating. Bellow was very interested in the anthroposophical writings of Rudolf Steiner. If you've read Humboldt's books, you might have remembered his fascination with Steiner. And in one letter to this British Steinerian named Otto Barfeld, Bellow writes this, quote, "There is the conviction that the law of the conservation of energy is all a mistake." And then he adds in a parenthesis, "This idea has too many poetic implications not to be true." That is an aestheticizer. Aestheticizers also tend to love mystery. A lot of novelists are aestheticizers. I am not an aestheticizer. Again, I probably would be a better novelist if I were an aestheticizer. What does an aestheticizer have to say about consciousness? Lots. Consciousness is what allows us to partake in the sublime. Consciousness is a sort of soul dust that swirls out from us to enchant all the world with our own phenomenology. Consciousness is the ambient world soul, some of it suctioned off and partitioned into us who communicate with one another and with the world soul by way of it. This is all taken from people that I know, aestheticizers all. Okay, T is a theologizer. Theologizers, I think, dislike the untidiness of philosophical problems almost as much as naturalizers do. Something has to be done with these mystifying facts, but instead of absorbing them into natural facts, they can be, and I'm not saying all theologizers do this, but when I make up words, I should be able to pronounce them. But some do. It is a way of approaching philosophical problems to absorb them in all of these various baffling problems into the one mysterious fact, the fact of God, which is, does accomplish a reduction in the number of mysterious facts. It has a certain arithmetical advantage. Consciousness is the divine spark within each of us. It signifies not only the touch of God that brings us into being, but being the divine spark. It's what keeps us always in communication with God. Again, a friend of mine, this is a quote from him, he's a preacher. The U stands for unsolve. You might think this is a poor strategy in philosophy, but in fact, in philosophy, unsolving is very hard work. Among contemporary philosophers, Tom Nagel is a prominent unsolver. He was also my dissertation advisor. I'm going to just go through because I want to get to the good part. R is a reifier. You know what they answer when it comes to the reifying. Just make up a new ontological category, a new category to absorb the mysterious fact. So when it comes to consciousness, the reifier reifies Cartesian dualism, right? There's a special separate substance, and that's where consciousness lies. The last of them, N-A-T-U-R-E, is an epistemologizer. And this strategy has affinities with the unsolver. But what an epistemologizer does is concentrates on our own particular cognitive abilities and says there's nothing intrinsically mysterious about this problem. Martians would be able to solve it like that, but they might find things that we solve very easily mystifying. It just happens to do with a mismatch between our particular cognitive capacities and this particular problem. Colin McGinn, among contemporary philosophers, is an epistemologizer. He doesn't call himself that, he calls himself something else, but he's an epistemologizer. Okay, these are the 6, I think, general. I was very lucky that it just turned out to spell out the world nature, because there were only 6 of them, and there they are. These are the strategies that we use when we try to do whatever it is that we call thinking. We disagree about what it is that we're doing when we're doing thinking. But I think, in fact, this is a very rough sketch of our individuality. We fall into many more types than 6. And it's really when we get to the core intuitions that are vast, that vary. There are many more than merely 6, that we get to some of the differences that make agreement across philosophical discussion so difficult. So what I'm going to do, I'm skipping a lot because somehow this is taking too long. But what I want to do is, I have this, that's a kind of argument, right? But given my own philosophical predilections, there can't be any argument without art. And so I want to play you this audio that is supposed to do some justice to the great individual variability when it comes to these 7 topics, these 7 ontological topics. If there is nothing that you hear that you respond to, nothing that says, oh yeah, I really believe that, that calls out to me, please tell me. Because I want to know, email me or tell me afterwards, you didn't get me, you didn't capture me, because I would like to know, I would like to hear that. Don't be shy, it would be a great help to me. So anyway, we're going to play this audio. Maybe.
Reality.
Whoops.
Reality is that which,
When you stop believing in it, it doesn't go away.
Wait, there's a problem.
The concept of God
There we go.
is the way in which we understand the incredible fact
The music is not playing.
Somehow or other is.
There we go. Okay.
Do what you will. This world's a fiction and is made up of contradiction.
There is no tribunal for knowledge beyond the natural sciences. Matter and energy, space and time. This is what science explains for us. This is what is.
Our physical reality isn't described by mathematics. It is mathematics. So we inhabit an abstract mathematical object, and this object doesn't exist within space and time. Space and time exist within it.
We're decipherers of the heavenly scrawl.
To be is to be the value of a bound variable.
Behind the cotton wool is hidden a pattern, and we, I mean all human beings, are connected with this. The whole world is a work of art, and we are parts of the work of art. We are the words, we are the music, we are the thing itself.
When I embrace the universe, I feel it embracing me back.
We must learn to live without the comforting illusion that we know anything at all.
Reason. The eyes of the mind, whereby it sees things and observes, are none other than proofs.
Reason itself is perfectly inert.
Logic is inviolable. I cannot think myself outside of it and still be thinking.
So there are no sacred propositions. The so-called inviolability of logic is nothing but indolence, born of habit.
There are truths that can't be expressed except by way of paradox. The opposite of a shallow truth is a shallow falsehood, but the opposite of a deep truth is another deep truth.
Reason that leads one too far from common sense is probably hiding some mistake or other. I wouldn't step out on a bridge built of reason's flimsy conditionals. Better to stay put on the terra firma of common sense. At least there's good company there.
What is common sense but utterly common? And why should reality give itself over to what is common? Reality is too subtle for the coarse-grained categories of common sense.
The heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing.
And all our intuitions mock the formal logic of a clock.
Time.
The only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once.
Time pushes on, impassive and unmarked. Its way to domesticate the flux, parceling it out into countable units so that we can situate ourselves within it. I am young and live in expectation. I am old and nearing the end of my days.
People like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
I force myself to state, if only in one line of unwritten poetry, this moment.
We think in eternity, but we move slowly through time.
The past follows us at every instant. What am I? What is this self, if not the condensation of the history that I've lived from the moment of my birth and even before?
Consciousness.
For something to be conscious means that there is something it is like to be that thing. Something it is like for that thing to be that thing.
Consciousness is a bag of tricks. The brain is a flim-flam artist. You are your own brain's stooge.
Experience is never limited, and it is never complete. It is an immense sensibility, a kind of huge spider web of the finest silken threads suspended in the chamber of consciousness and catching every airborne particle in its tissue.
I still find
consciousness is the spark of divinity within us, our Creator's reminder that we are so far from being able to comprehend all that is out there that we can't even begin to comprehend what is within.
It feels like something to be a brain, but why this should be so, no brain, at least not one of our sort, can fathom.
Consciousness is a disease.
Free will.
My first act of free will be to believe in free will.
A stone thrown through the air would, if conscious, attribute its path to its own free will. We are those tall stones.
I must believe in free will. I have no choice.
The only free person is the one who lives constrained by reason.
We can trace out all the complexities of the moral universe, but without the capacity to choose our decisions rather than have them be chosen. That moral universe is as far to us as Eve, guarded by the flaming seraph.
It is in the rare moments only, moments of being, that we encounter the unified self and know it in its state of absolute freedom.
That freedom that is within me, no man can take away. It's the source of my dignity, my humanity. You may shackle my body, but the person within me freely condemns you and deems my enslaver more shackled than I.
I am condemned to be free.
Separated.
Let sanguine healthy-mindedness do its best, with its strange power of living in the moment and ignoring and forgetting. Still, the evil background is really there to be thought of, when the skull will grin in at the banquet.
I don't know why we are here, but I am pretty sure that it is not in order to enjoy ourselves.
Do you not see how necessary a world of pains and troubles is to school an intelligence and make it a soul?
I don't want more suffering, and if the suffering of children go to swell the sum of sufferings which were necessary to pay for truth, then I protest that the truth is not worth such a price. I would rather remain with my unavenged suffering and unsatisfied indignation, even if I were wrong.
What presumption to think it incumbent on the universe to offer us any consolation for our troubled lives.
I know that God loves me, and even in suffering, I will rejoice.
The whole planet can suffer no greater torment than a single soul. The self.
What is your substance, whereof you are made, that millions of strange shadows on you tend?
Whatever else I can doubt, I cannot doubt the existence of myself. There is nothing in all the worlds I know with more intimacy and certainty.
For my part, when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other. I can never catch myself at any time, and never can observe anything but the perception. If anyone, upon serious and unprejudiced reflection, thinks he has a different notion of himself, I must confess I can reason no longer with him.
I am a real thing and really exist. But what thing? I have answered, a thing which thinks.
I have a body, and I cannot escape from it. That being the case, I would like to call attention to my problem.
I can conceive of myself without this body. What is inconceivable is that I am this body and nothing more.
That I am who I am is not only a necessary truth about me, but about the whole universe.
One of the most misleading representational techniques in our language is the use of the word I. The self is a shadow cast by the grammar of the first person pronoun I.
And will the self that accompanies me everywhere accompany me past the door of death?
Death.
Death is a fearful thing.
To himself, everyone is immortal. He may know that he is going to die, but he can never know that he is dead.
It
It is a fearsome thing to love what time can touch.
That is unthinkable. How can that immense intricacy of teeming reality that is a person, all that striving of becoming, suddenly vanish from the world, as if it had never been?
The wise man thinks least of all things on death. His life is a continual contemplation, not on death, but on life.
Nothing has left us but death. We look to it with a certain grim satisfaction, saying, there at least is reality. There is the distinguished thing at last.
The eternal silence of these infinite spaces fill me with dread.
That's going to go on for a long time.
A lot of papers. Okay, lights. That's it. Do we have time for questions? Just a few. I won't embarrass anybody, but if there was nothing there that called out to you, yeah.
When you talk about a craving for truth, would you distinguish between understanding and explanation? That what we really crave is understanding, not so much explanation.
Yeah. I think, well, there are those of us who believe that there is no understanding. The way one achieves understanding is through explanation. And so that I think that is very much a Platonic, Spinozist view that the only way that we can possibly understand the nature of reality is to be able to explain it, to offer something that makes sense. That is to give grounds that are objective, that appeal to anybody who uses that methodology. Everything else can be an illusion. And so nothing else. And even the explanations can be wrong. So all that we have to go on is putting our explanations out there so that others can try to knock them down, right? And that's certainly what one does in science and what one does in philosophy as well. That's the only thing that's reliable, and even that's not reliable. I don't, and that is very much my understanding of what understanding is as well. Nothing else seems to me to be trustworthy.
Aren't you suggesting that these moral intuitions themselves may be a kind of understanding or knowing that actually is not an explanation? Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So actually, moral I was not really talking about moral. Moral, I think that we are faced with a certain fact, which is as real as what we're faced with through the senses from which we take off. And that is the fact, the undeniable fact that one personally matters, and we can't really doubt it. You can, just as we can doubt the existence of the external world and never put those doubts to rest, but we can't really operate in this world without trusting that there is an external reality. It's impossible to live a human life with making choices, caring about what's going to happen to your future, without thinking that it matters. And even if you think that you don't matter at all, that matters. That's when you want to kill yourself, right? I mean, it matters so very much that you want to end it all. So we are faced with certain facts, and then we try to build from there implications. And we matter. Can we be the only one who matters in the universe? And we build from there. Eventually we get to the view, it's taken us a very long time, that everybody matters, right? To the extent that we matter, which we can't doubt, everybody matters. There, I think, but these metaphysical intuitions, what we can do, we don't know. We really don't know. It is, we don't understand. What we can do is we can understand where these intuitions that we have lead us to. Some of them may be inconsistent what we discover in science. Many people would say that, for example, Cartesian dualism is no longer consistent with what we're learning from cognitive and affective neuroscience. I would probably argue that. But if you're absolutely, if your core intuition is that we are an immaterial thing, then that is consistent with all of the empirical evidence that we have. There can just be a one-to-one correspondence between everything that happens in our immaterial self and the material body. So, I would say that we don't have understanding here. We can understand these positions, and we can go further and further with understanding these positions. But between everything that empirical facts can give us and where reason can take us, there's a gap. There are many versions of the world that are possible, that are consistent with all of the empirical facts that we presently have. Maybe someday we'll have more, hard to say. But presently, with all the empirical facts we have, and with how far carrying out the implications through logical arguments can get us, there's a gap there. But we're not going to just stop and say, well, I just don't know. I don't know what I am. I don't know what's in store for me. Ourselves, our individuality fills the gap. Is that understanding? No, that's being human. That's being human. We're going to get our bearings one way or the other. But there's no way, if somebody completely disagrees with you on these basic intuitions, there's no way to reason them out. You can't, we don't even, believe me, I know, having been in many of these discussions, we don't even agree on what reasons are. What constitutes good reasons. So is that yeah, yes?
I'll bet everybody in this room can think of a novel which does not seem to show all the characteristics that you claim that all novels show. And I wonder if you could talk about particular novels which give you trouble, where you cannot find evidence, easy evidence that they do all the things that you said.
Yeah, no, most of them don't do everything I say they do. But when it comes to these normative emotions, that is manipulating who we identify with and who we don't, there are certainly novels, I guess, where you don't identify with anybody, you don't care, you just don't care about anybody. I'd say that's a failure of a novel, really, if you just simply don't care. You may not like them.
Novels that don't do those things.
Well, perhaps. Well, there are bad novelists, aren't there? As far as the metaphysical, I wouldn't say all 7 of those subtopics are dealt with. But some subset of them, certainly, does reality care about us or not? Is it intelligible? When you're plotting something, is this an intelligible thing? Is it just going to, is there no pattern that the characters can grasp? Or yes, is there some sort of intelligible pattern? You've got to make a choice about that. You've got to make a choice if your novel has a character as to what constitutes a character. How do we identify this as being the same character over time? What can we change about the character, and what can't you change about the character? And it simply won't be the character anymore. The nature of consciousness, time, somehow or other, a novel has to deal with time. It doesn't have to deal with suffering. It doesn't have to deal with death. Although I actually think that all novels, even very funny ones, somehow deal with death. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. The character's story stops. And that's why every time I finish a novel, I'm sad, even if it's a happy novel. Somehow, to me, they all speak of death. But that might just be me. But I think, reality, consciousness, character, time, somehow or other, a novel has got to deal with those issues. And we make very, very different choices in how we deal with them. Yeah.
You suggested that the traditional methods of philosophy, as they're represented from the time of Plato on, have dealt with these metaphysical issues, and even now, as you point out, there are conflicting intuitions with respect to these things. Maybe they're ungrounded, unexplained intuitions, and you've been in enough seminars to know that that's the way that one puts one's heels down and that's it. Now the question is the novelist able to help resolve these kinds of issues? Now I want to follow that up. I'm an admirer of the Googleplex book, and I noticed that it is in some sense in the form of a novel, but it's a succession of Platonic dialogues. Now, I don't think there are poets in the dialogues, and Plato's view about this matter is that if you're going to get a handle on any of those truths, you've got to do it through the dialogue method, which you seem to admire in that book. So, what's the role of the novel in philosophy is the question.
Well, as I say, I think morally it's extremely important that it can carry us further. Cribbing from Kant, I often say that moral arguments without moral emotions or moral intuitions are empty, but moral emotions, moral intuitions without moral arguments are blind. And I think that novels are very, very effective in arousing moral emotions in us. And the good ones arouse good moral emotions in us. There can be bad moral emotions aroused in us by novels. And how do we tell the difference there? I think we need moral philosophy, right? But I think there's a very symbiotic, morally I think it's a very symbiotic relationship. Metaphysically is what you're talking about. No, I don't. To me, it doesn't help. What it can help both novels, dialogue, and philosophical argument is to refine our intuitions, see where they lead to, have very, very interesting discourse with those who, and frustrating discourse with those who basically disagree on these basic intuitions. But I don't see novels. I mean, I love novels, and I'm very susceptible to their charms. I feel morally often enlightened by novels, but I don't feel metaphysically enlightened by them. I get convinced by them. If it's a good enough novel, I will buy into that version of reality and that version of character. Whether it's a reliable or unreliable reality, I'll buy into it for as long as I read the novel. But when the magic is over, when the enchantment is over, I'm back where I started. I don't, by the way, write novels according to the way I think reality is. So, for example, you mentioned my Bohemian novel. properties of light. It's filled with metaphysics that I don't believe in.
That's why Plato didn't trust poets.
Exactly, right.
Here's the question.
Oh, yes.
I enjoyed your talk a great deal, and I think I'm in total agreement with you about the importance of literature. But I still have a question from which you started, and that is, why do you think Plato banished the poets?
Yeah.
What possessed him that day?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my question.
I think there are several answers to that, but I think it was overdetermined. I think he had many reasons. And one is, he believed in reality, for sure, right? Believed that there is one reality, and that what philosophy is meant to do is to give us access to it. I mean, again, the myth of the cave is the best. And since there is one reality, those who apprehend reality will all be of one mind. Spinoza also believes this very, very much, right? We to the extent that we allow reason to guide us to the nature of reality, and it's accessible to us through reason, that's the hidden premise, which I think is false. But since it is accessible to us through reason, since there's only one reality, if we allow reality to form our minds, we will all be of one mind. It's a wonderful, we will all, to the extent that we're reasonable, we will share exactly the same identity. What a very hopeful idea. It was an idea of Spinoza, really fed the Enlightenment. But so why do we need these emotions to get in the way and tell us what reality is like? And who gives these poets any? They're not using reason. That's the only way that we can, the only thing that we can trust. So they're irresponsible. They'll do anything, as I just confessed, do anything for an aesthetic effect, right? I have it's a ghost story. I don't believe in ghosts. It's the last thing I believe. Oh, well, don't. Forget I said that. If you want to read the novel, I've just ruined it for you. But in any case, we will do anything for an aesthetic effect. So we're not trustworthy, and for a moral effect too. The other reason that he banishes them is that he is so mistrustful of human nature. He thinks we have hungry, greedy, selfish, dreadful animals within us, and that there is what society has to do. Society has to be arranged in such a way as to tame down that animal within us and encourage the better angels of our nature. And so that makes him, go in very heavy-handedly for censorship, and even in the laws, he's censoring very, very heavily. It's not just in the Republic. In the laws he allows some art, but it's basically art that will promote the best feelings. It's lousy art, basically. The kind of music he allows, it's militaristic music. He would have hated opera. I mean, it's just. So, that's why I think that's why he does it. But Plato, more than any philosopher, I think, knows the power of art. I mean, he is a great, great artist, a great poet. When he lets loose with that lyricism, nobody can beat him. But it's all to promote that emotion of transcendence, of getting past our little selves, of intellectual ecstasy, right? That's what he's after, and he gives it to us, right? That's why poets have loved him, and poets have been inspired by him ever since. Shelley has a fantastic translation of the Symposium that I very much recommend. Anyway.
We have one more question.
Yes.
To balance the room.
Well, if you were trying to wind up.
If you have a quick question, quick answer,
is there such a thing, Jenny?
Well, you can.
No, we'll cut it in half. What kind of valuable work can philosophy or can literature do on philosophy? I mean, are there novelists who do in the ontological sphere?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, for example.
I think,
a novel like Madame Bovary's makes very serious ontological claims about the self, the nature of self. And it would challenge, I think, many notions of selves that were regnant philosophically in that time.
No, I think that's true.
Do you grant? It seems to me that you're not being advocate enough for either side of this.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. And here's one thing that I know that novels can do. You know, I've seen it with my students. I've seen it with people. That if you just can't imagine the world being a certain way, you just can't grasp what somebody who has a different intuition, metaphysical, ontological intuition from you, you can't grasp, what it would be like to believe that. Novels can help you. I don't think it can tell you what's true and what's not, but it can give one a sense of a panoply of possibilities that fan out around these mystifying questions, or not mystifying questions if you don't accept that there is such a thing as mystifying. But I think that it can do that, and so that you have a better sense of what you don't believe, which is very, very important, right? That's a very important, expansive state of mind to be in. To be clear about what you believe, you have to be very clear about what you don't believe. And sometimes you believe something so very strongly that you can't even entertain not believing it. And that seems to me novels are very, very helpful in that regard. Is that enough good for novels?
All right, please join me in thanking food and drink in the back. Please help yourself and enjoy it.
John.